Okay, to that end, we're a little past 1:30, and I also want to be respectful of everyone's time, so I think we'll get started. So in recognition and observation and observance actually of November being National Family Caregivers Month, AgeGuide staff have structured this meeting to be an opportunity for our funded partners to invite their frontline staff, care coordinators, and other direct service staff to join us today to become more familiar with the National Family Caregiver Support Services available for caregivers and their families. The goal is for our network to better understand that their clients may not self-identify as caregivers and to be prepared to suggest and recommend the information and tools necessary to support their clients in need of services which can help relieve their caregiver burden. And now I'm going to remind you, because I know many of you have heard this quote from Rosalind Carter, that there are only 4 types of people in this world: those who have been caregivers, those who are currently caregivers, those who will be caregivers, and those who will need caregivers. And as you know, many caregivers do not identify as such. They mostly feel like they're just doing what needs to be done. They are fulfilling their role as a spouse, daughter, or son, etc. And for some reason, the majority of people acting in a caregiver role are hesitant to consider themselves caregivers. In fact, according to an AARP caregiver identification study, only about 19% of caregivers in this country are willing to identify themselves. So as family members, neighbors, friends, and service providers, we must recognize that caregivers often do not ask for help. And so we are charged with identifying informal, unpaid caregivers who are in need of support and connecting them with services, because when the needs of caregivers are addressed, the care recipients also benefit. And I want to share a quick example of this that I am sure many of you will recognize this having taken place in your own lives. So I'm at the Meijer on a Sunday afternoon about a month ago when I ran into an old friend of mine named Lisa, who I hadn't seen in many years. She had 5 kids like me, and they're just about the same age. So I asked if she would be becoming an empty nester soon. Her response was to say that her mom, who had dementia, lives with her and her family. Now, then she proceeded to explain that her dad had moved in with her family some years ago when it was discovered that he had the onset of dementia, and when it had become hard for his wife, her mother, to take care of him, he had moved in per his wishes to Lisa's home with her family, and he had lived the rest of his life with them, and they cared for him until he passed away in their home. So then I asked her if at any point during that time when her father lived with her, if she had called the local service agency in her area to ask for help. And she said, yes, I did. And I was told that I did not qualify for services. So that was the one and only call Lisa made, and she never sought additional help again. So unfortunately, her dad never had any additional services other than the services the support her family could provide for themselves. Now, flash forward to the present, I'm standing there trying to explain that as she's taking care of her mother with dementia now, that there are services available. And she stops me to say, do they have a diaper bank? It really would be great if I could get some help with that. It's weird, but I don't think that I've ever stopped buying diapers for someone. As you can see from my story, we only get one shot sometimes to give people the help or get them the help they need. And if we fail or we don't give that information in a way that they can understand, they will spend the rest of their lives never knowing that there's help available. So I truly hope that today, in the spirit of National Family Caregiver Month, that we as the network can continue to identify and support caregivers and help them in their journey. And now I would like to introduce Lucinda Hurd, Manager of Access Services and Community Programs, to provide some AgeGuide updates. Lucinda.
Thank you, Leslie. Next, we want to, like Leslie said, provide you with some brief updates before we get into talking more about the specific services that are available under the family caregiver programs. So we have a couple of events coming up that we wanted to share with you. I know we've been kind of previewing this one a little bit in some of our meetings. So as part of our area plan initiatives to increase support for family caregivers, AgeGuide has begun hosting last year different events and usually centered around November in recognition of Family Caregiver Month. So this year, we're a day late. On December 1st, we will host an event called the Caring Economy. This event will build off of what we started talking about in the Aging Summit. This event is virtual and is targeted at businesses, both for-profit and nonprofit, public, private sector, any business, obviously, that is employing persons. And Ellen Burchander from the University of Massachusetts, Boston will talk about why supporting family caregivers in the workforce is important. And AARP will review their Supporting Caregivers in the Workplace Toolkit. And then Marla will be reviewing the services that are available through the Older Americans Act, not just in our region, but this is geared towards all businesses, so they don't have to be conducting business in our region and are welcome from all areas of the state and in the country if you have connections to those outside of our state. So we hope that you'll attend this seminar with your HR and manager hat on so that you can learn how you can make your business really more caregiver friendly. And we hope that you'll share this flyer and this registration with people throughout your various networks. If you aren't on our listserv, we will forward this flyer. Well, we will forward it to you anyways, but it has gone out from our vast email listserv to register online, and we'll forward the flyer after in follow up to this meeting. Next slide. And then next, we will also be hosting an implicit bias training on December 15th. Dr. Jeffrey Task from Benedictine University will explore automatic unintentional bias that we all carry. We will learn about implicit bias and the tools and strategies to address it. Our goal with this training is that everyone leaves it with a little more understanding and awareness of how our own implicit bias shapes how we approach certain people and handle situations. This training is specifically for our network, and we expect to see our funded partners and their staff in attendance. Next slide. And lastly, for the updates, we wanted to provide you another update on the robotic pets that we talked about in the last meeting. We have purchased about 500 Joy for All robotic pets. On the screen, you'll see what is available. So there are 3 types of cats, 2 types of dogs, and 2 types of birds that are available. They are battery operated. They come with the batteries. The cats and dogs you can shut off. The birds, I have learned you cannot. So, and the birds are motion activated. So once they're sitting for a long period of time, they usually will shut off. The pets are now available in many of our office storage spaces in our office, waiting for you to provide them to your clients who have dementia. So anyone who is receiving a pet must have a completed intake and be entered into Aging IS if you have access to Aging IS. If you do not, there's a handful of our providers that don't have access to Aging IS. You will receive an intake form that you will need to complete for that client, and you can give it to us either in person or email when you put your order in. So on the screen, on the slide, there is a link to the order form. Again, this will go out after the meeting. And so that is an order form for you to order from your agency. So DuPage, I'll use you as an example. If DuPage County Community Services has identified 10 people who need, who would like pets, they would then place that order for those 10 through that link to us, and then we will follow up and communicate getting that, arrange that delivery. DuPage is close to our office, so that's not harder. But for those of you who are outside of our, immediate region, we'll arrange delivery or pick up however we need to get those to you as our staff are traveling throughout our counties, as we're traveling home through different counties, we'll arrange that. The demographics are required in Aging IS because we do have to report those to the department quarterly. Did somebody have a question?
There is a question in the chat, Lucinda,
Okay.
about people living in assisted living. I know it says they need to be in the community and not in long-term care, but what about
Correct.
assisted living? Do they qualify?
Only in the community, not in a licensed facility.
You know, we had another question too, if we have to go
Mhm.
back a second.
Yeah,
For the
yeah.
implicit bias training.
Yeah.
Somebody had asked if there were CEUs available for that training.
CEUs are not available at this time for that training, but we can check on if we can make those available. The robotic pets, for those of you familiar with our ADRD gap funding, like all of our Older Americans Act funding, is limited to persons living in the community and not in a licensed facility. So the pets are fall under that same eligibility. The link is in the in the slide. It will go out after this. Caitlin Tolentino is the lead for this project. She will actually be on vacation. The timing is a little short, but she will be leaving on vacation at the end of this week. So if you do put an order in on the form, she will address that when she returns after the 21st. I know that some of you have started making lists, so we're excited to get these robotic pets out into the world. Every once in a while, I take the demo bird that we've opened up and walk around the office with it, and it's kind of a nice, it is a nice little song for the day. It's a nice little break from the day. So we hope that you will spread these far and wide to your persons with dementia. And speaking of Caitlin, I will hand over the podium to her, so to speak, to review the caregiver services that are available.
Perfect. Thank you, Lucinda. You can go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So hi, everyone. My name is Caitlin Tolentino. I am the caregiver and dementia specialist here at AgeGuide. And in honor of Family Caregivers Month, I'm going to just be reviewing all the caregiver support services available, starting with the ADRD funding. So the purpose of ADRD funding is to create a sustainable dementia-capable system for persons with dementia and their caregivers. It essentially provides funds to assist in meeting a person's needs or their caregiver's needs as a result of dementia, and it does fall under the category of supportive gap-filling services. There is no age restriction in order to access ADRD gap funds. Any person of any age, diagnosed or undiagnosed, with dementia can access funds, and then any caregiver of any age that provides unpaid care for a person with dementia can access these funds as well. Next slide, please. Here we have some specifics about the expenditures. So covered services, supports, or goods includes any type of care. So that would be medical care, home health care, personal care, adult daycare, and respite care. Medical supplies can also be covered. Wanderer alarm systems, behavioral health assessments, and medications are just some examples of that. Then we have environmental and material aids. So this can be assistive technology devices, minor home modifications, nutrition or housing assistance. And then lastly, community access, which are things such as transportation, gas cards, and vehicle adaptation. All other goods and services that do not fall into any of those categories must be approved by AgeGuide before accessing funds. There are also some expenditure caps. So all regional funds are set aside and available on a first come, first served basis. All funds and what they are being spent on requires AgeGuide approval. Any type of home modification and repair is capped at $2,000 per client, and then all other types of expenditures are limited to $1,500 per client. In addition, requests for reimbursements can also be submitted. So CRCs, CCCs, or ADRNs can receive a 10% reimbursement for any admin costs. Next slide, please. So in addition to ADRD funding, there is also the Family Caregiver Program. This program is for unpaid family caregivers that fulfill at least one of the following eligibility requirements. So unpaid caregivers for adults 60 or older, or unpaid caregivers for a care recipient of any age with Alzheimer's or other related dementias. Within this program, there are many different services available, which is the list to the right-hand side in orange. Caregiver resource centers, respite services, gap filling, counseling, training, and education and support groups are all available for caregivers to access. Next slide, please. Next is the Relatives Raising Children program. This is otherwise known as Grandparents Raising Grandchildren. This program supports non-parent relative caregivers, which are defined as anyone that is 55 and up, raising a child in the place of the parents. For instance, a grandmother, grandfather, aunt or uncle, 55 and older, that's taking responsibility for another child because the parents are unwilling or unable to do so. In this program, the child is defined as 18 or under or 18 and over with a severe disability. This program is similar to the family caregiver program that I just talked about in the way that much of the same services are provided. Resource centers, respite, gap filling, counseling, training, and education and support groups. The only difference between this program and the services that are provided from the family caregiver program is that these are all specifically tailored towards relatives raising children that are not biologically their own. I do just want to quickly mention that AgeGuide does have a service for grandparents raising grandchildren that are under the age of 55. So currently we're still awaiting our IDOA award for that, but we do expect it soon. So please be aware, since we do anticipate that that will open up in a very short time here. Next slide, please. So the providers for caregiver support services are broken down into two different categories. The first category of providers are the Caregiver Resource Centers, or CRCs for short. The CRCs are designated identifiable resource centers that serve as a point of entry to a broad range of services for caregivers. And then each county in our service region has a specific provider. Those are listed right there in blue. In addition to the CRCs, there are also Caregiver Counseling Centers, or CCCs for short. These counseling centers are designated identifiable centers that provide counseling services to caregivers. There are many providers between these two lists that overlap, meaning they fulfill the role of both CRCs and CCCs. The only different ones I do want to point out are Metropolitan Family Services as the DuPage Counseling Center, the Kendall County Health Department, which is the Kendall Counseling Center, and then Independence Health and Therapy, which is the McHenry Counseling Center. And with all that information said, I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to Lucinda so she can discuss another caregiver service.
There was one question or comment. If somebody knows somebody who was a grandmother age 55 and was told she wasn't old enough when applying for gap filling, do you have any next steps or suggestions?
So if she's not old enough for the, is that for the
It was 55. This was at yesterday's grandparent meeting, and
okay.
She had an appointment scheduled through DuPage County, and the appointment was canceled because they said she wasn't a senior. So I've been telling all the grandparents to get a T-Care assessment because many of them have emergency needs.
Yes.
But she was kind of denied. So there may just be an educational issue. I'm trying to figure out from the grandparent who she was working with, but she was told 55 was not old enough.
Okay, so that would actually fall under the service that I talked about for grandparents raising grandchildren for the ages under 55. And that award we don't have quite yet. So that's the one that we're waiting on to administer because we're still waiting for our allocation from IDOA. But that's going to open up soon. So 55 is the cutoff age.
So she has to be 56. You have to actually be 56 then.
55.
She's
55 and older. So let's, Kelly, can you email that information to Caitlin and I, and we can work to bridge that gap and find out what's going on.
Okay, thank you.
That would be great.
Thank you, Kelly.
Okay, so thank you, Caitlin. We just wanted to take this opportunity You've heard us talking about T-Care or tailored care assessment in many of our meetings and at the Aging Summit. And so we wanted to take this opportunity to educate not many of the managers probably on this call know what T-Care is, but we wanted to take this opportunity to educate further, and hopefully your staff are joining us so that Sherry from T-Care will be discussing more about what T-Care is, why it's important, the history of it, and what the benefit is to the caregiver when they go through this screening and assessment. So I'd like to introduce Sherry from Tailored Care to review this information and train us on T-Care.
Thank you, Lucinda. Yes,
Thank you.
I appreciate being asked to come and present. So as Lucinda said, so
Leslie,
my name is
hold on, Leslie, you're
sure.
sorry.
No, that's okay.
You're off the screen, Leslie. You're on your email. There you go. Sorry about
Okay.
that.
That's okay.
Next slide, Leslie.
Okay, so as I was saying, so my name is Sherry Popelka. I'm the customer success manager here at T-Care. So I'm, for those in the call that have gone through onboarding with me, that is part of what I do. So I talk about what T-Care is. I previously was a specialist as well, so I'm very well versed with the assessment itself. But also, like Lucinda said, so I'll just kind of go over what T-Care is, what we do, our history. Just as it says there on the slide, so what T-Care is, we work on reducing caregiver burnout and delaying long-term care placement, such as a nursing home or other type of care setting. Next slide, please. And so how T-Care works with and benefits AAAs and other organizations is we are able to produce high impact caregiver outcomes as the research-backed questions feed into the algorithm that gets caregivers connected with the resources and tools that are most needed and offer the most support through our care plan. Additionally, the care plan is able to allow caregivers to get connected to those resources that they may not have otherwise have known about. I know for myself, when I was working with caregivers, many of them didn't know what was out there. And so getting them connected to those resources, especially when they're open to doing so, that's the other thing, as I think as a country have moved to understand how important it is to take care of caregivers. They've been able to accept some help when maybe previously they weren't as open to doing so. The other thing that we do with our assessment is understand the state of the health of the caregiver themselves. So much of their time and attention is put on the person that they're caring for. And so we're able to ask how they're doing and make sure that they're also taking care of themselves while they're doing this, can be incredibly stressful and hard job of being a caregiver. And then lastly, we are able to drive staff time to caregivers greatest in need with our screener tool. So that screener tool is one that T-Care specialists or staff themselves can forward out to the caregiver, and they can answer, a set of questions about what they're doing with their caregiving time and how they feel about being a caregiver. It can also be found on websites or, I know Facebook groups, any of those things. What that does is puts it into the platform for the staff to then reach out to those caregivers that need the help the most. And then next slide, please. So just a little bit of history. So T-Care was, and a lot of this, of course, is here on the PowerPoint, but T-Care was created to manage the risk of caregiver behavior that leads to burnout. This is based on the research findings of Dr. Rhonda Montgomery out of the University of Wisconsin. And the T-Care that we know today was founded in 2017, but of course there were many years of research before that got to the point we are using the computer. It was a paper and pencil assessment before we were where we are today. So next slide, please. And so I like to put this in here. So all of that research has led to T-Care being the only evidence-based, Medicaid-approved, federally credited, and scientifically validated caregiving approach in the country. And then next slide. And so just to talk about what those research findings were from Dr. Rhonda Montgomery, it isn't necessarily the caregiving activities or the hours of care that leads to the prediction for attention into a different type of care setting or caregiver burnout, but rather it is the mental, emotional, and behavioral states of the caregiver that can lead to what is called identity discrepancy. Next, and just to go into a little bit, what identity discrepancy is, because I know when I started in this, it wasn't something that I was necessarily familiar with that definition. But identity discrepancy is when the caregiver is carrying out responsibilities and activities related to caring for the loved one that are not in line with their own personal boundaries or norms. And so just an example that I often use, because I saw this all the time when I was doing the assessments. If you think about, as a adult child taking care of their parent, where that role's reversed, and they're often having to help with the bathing, toileting, dressing. No matter how they come to being a caregiver, those things can be uncomfortable. And so when you're able to identify that, you can get them connected with those resources, when it comes to, education, tips, tools, or even allowing someone to come in the home, if that is available. We know that is not always available, but all of, those are just some of the things that you could do to work on reducing that measure that we have. But then the other things that we also measure with our assessment is stress and depression. So depression, of course, is not the diagnostic tool. It's merely a screener, just to open up and get them to talk about mental health, because we know that can still be very difficult for some people. Next, we have objective burden. Those are those things is when a caregiver perceives that their caregiving roles are taking over other aspects of their personal life, such as their own family obligations, social life, work. Many of our caregivers are in that sandwich generation where they have their own, families at home, and then take over the caring for a parent or another family member. So that's a lot on their plate to really deal with. Next, we have relationship burden, which is the extent to which the caregiver perceives that the care receiver or person they're caring for makes demands over and above what they need or what their diagnosis warrants. And then, of course, identity discrepancy. And there is a question in the assessment related to the visual here. But, this is just, I like to show this. If you think on the left-hand side, they're still able to maintain that family relationship. And then as that caregiver role takes over, burnout sets in. And then, that's when that talk of placement into a nursing home can happen. And of course, our goal is to make sure people age at home as long as possible. And then, of course, I'd like to mention we measure uplifts. No matter how stressful or hard it can be to be a caregiver, there are good things that come from that, and we make sure and identify those. And then, of course, we measure intention to place and then future intention to place. So this is just some of those different statements or feelings, thoughts that caregivers can have, and I'll let everyone read through those. But these are, for anyone that's worked with a caregiver, these are pretty common. So I like to put these in here as examples of what this can sound like. Just for an example, if you think about identity discrepancy, am I a son or a caregiver? I can't tell anymore. That there is identity discrepancy. So I just like to put these on here as examples. And just wanted to kind of talk about what our workflow is like if you're not familiar with TCare. So as I had mentioned previously, we do have that TCare screener tool where they are able to themselves answer the questions. And then that is put into our actual platform where the specialist will reach out and complete the full assessment, which gets, gather some additional information on what it is that they're doing as the caregiver. And that feeds into our decision algorithm that determines goals, strategy, and intervention that is then put into the tailored care plan. And so with our care plan, there are both local and virtual resources. As we know, not all caregivers have the time or ability to leave their home and participate in things, but that doesn't mean there aren't resources out there to get them the help that they need. And then once that is delivered, there is a weekly engagement at the caregiver's choice through our platform. It's a text message that is sent to them asking how they're doing. And then if they have a higher level of stress, the specialist or the care manager is able to reach out to them and see what is going on. But then additionally, there is the 3-month follow-up that is you know, where the specialist care manager will reach out, ask the same questions that they did the first time to continue working with them to ensure that one, they're taking care of themselves, but two, their loved one can stay at home as long as possible. And then, of course, we have our data lab, which is where all of our reporting is for, you know, different needs of agencies. And just, you know, numbers, I like to put these on here. So this is just over a period of time. All the information is on the bottom of where this was pulled from. But with using and engaging in T-Care, 84% reported lower levels of stress and depression. 3 months, after 3 months that work to reduce levels of stress. And then there's 79% engagement at the 3-month follow-up and 54% at 12-month follow-up. You know, so we know re-engaging can be half the battle when it comes to working with people. So, you know, we are able to see that people will re-engage with T-Care. And then again, just numbers so you understand, you know, what you're a part of when you work with T-Care. We're now in 32 states, serving 250,000 plus caregivers and working with 700 plus care professionals all across the country. And then that's just my contact information. If anyone would have any questions, that's my email, and then my personal cell phone. Everyone is welcome to reach out to me at any time with any questions. I don't know if there's any questions. I probably went faster than the 30 minutes because I just started talking, but.
We have time for questions. That's the good
Yes.
news. So maybe I should just pause sharing my screen and then we can take some questions if people have them.
Sure.
Anybody have any questions for Sherry?
So I
There's
see
one
in
in the
here.
chat.
Yes. What does a plan of care look like for a caregiver? So I think that's, again, one of the good things about T-Care. That's, you know, of course, based on the way they answer those questions, but, you know, for those specialists in the field or care managers, however, they're specialists in our world, but care managers, you know, with it, working in the field, you can use, you know, what they've told you to then get a tailored care plan based off what is needed for them. I've had some caregivers who needed a lot of help, like they maybe needed connection to Meals on Wheels, or they were new to caregiving and needed energy assistance and didn't even know that was a thing. Other ones may just need education. You know, they're newly working with someone with Alzheimer's and they don't understand it. So getting them that type of information. So it really can be anything in between. It could be respite, it could be support groups, any of those things that will help the caregiver with the, you know, the expertise of the person working with the caregiver.
And if I can, Sherry, it may also not be, you know, we really think about the caregiver in relation in their care, you know, caregiving role, but T-Care also helps identify the needs that they have as people. So maybe like on one of your quotes that it says, my marriage is suffering because I'm caregiving, essentially. And so T-Care can also help identify maybe this person needs marriage counseling. Maybe there are other needs that they brought into that caregiving relationship and role that can be addressed but aren't identified because their role becomes being the caregiver. So it's not just about their caregiving role and identity, but also about the other identities that they have that they may need support on. Hopefully I'm saying that accurately.
That's a very good point. As an example, I worked with a caregiver that it wasn't so much the caregiving role that was stressing her out. It was the fact that she felt like she was neglecting her family or her daughter who she couldn't give all her attention to. So getting her connected to a summer camp, so she didn't feel like she was, you know, not paying enough attention. So yeah, that's a very good point. It's not, even as I have a social work background. So, you know, this is a different type of getting them connected to the resources that they often neglect for themselves.
Any other questions? Okay. Well, if anything comes up, please enter it in the chat and we can go back to it. Thank you so much, Sherry, for being here and for being at all of our meetings where we are helping support the staff implementing T-Care to make sure that we're serving our caregivers and thus our care recipients to the best of our ability.
Happy to be here. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Next, we wanted to have people share some stories. We have a couple different folks who are willing to share stories. So the first one is going to be Amanda Foltz. We were hoping to have a couple of caregivers present or share their stories, but we're unable to secure two, but we have Amanda from Catholic Charities who is willing to talk about briefly what her experience administering T-Care is and the feedback and observations that she's had with caregivers. And then Jen Agnew from our advisory council is, like Leslie said, we all will need care or give care. And she is a caregiver herself and has taken advantage of some of the services. And so she'll share after Amanda what her experiences have been in and how those services have helped her. So I will pass the baton over to Amanda from Catholic Charities.
Thank you, Lucinda.
I
I don't
need a
have anything
baton today.
prepared to say, so I don't know how long I'll take up here, but
Yeah.
so my job changed probably like last year in October. So my sole focus here now at Catholic Charities is on caregivers, right? Caregivers of older adults and grandparents raising grandchildren. And I have been working with the T-Care assessment tool and have been seeing success with it. I think oftentimes when caregivers reach out to me, first, they have no idea that any of these things even exist, right? They don't even know respite exists, these the ADRD funding, app services support groups. So they're really relieved to be seen and heard. I know some of the feedback I've gotten from caregivers, so often the focus is on the person that they're taking care of, right? So they're going to these doctor's appointments with their loved one, and the doctors are focused on that chronic health issue or the dementia or different things like that. So when the caregiver gets to me or whoever, the caregiver resource center, they're really relieved to be seen and heard finally, and somebody there to listen to them and to support them fully. I think the other thing that I've noticed is caregivers often don't know what they need, right? Or they often think like, oh, I need some help in the home, which may be true. Maybe they do need some help in the home and some respite. But using the T-Care assessment, it helps to identify more specifically what their needs are. So, and I've heard this said, I think Sherry touched on it, but maybe they need some education around Alzheimer's disease or dementia. Maybe they need a support group. Just it helps kind of narrow it down, because I think oftentimes caregivers, it's just the nature of what they're doing. They're overwhelmed. They don't know what questions to ask. They don't know these things are even out there. And then, so it helps to kind of narrow it down, create a plan of care, a plan of action with them, of how we can best help them. Yeah. I had a caregiver in mind to come and talk on the meeting today, but he had doctor's appointments signed up for his mother. So I think that's the nature of being a caregiver too, right? They're just busy all the time. So, yeah.
Thank you so much, Amanda. I know you thought you were gonna, Amanda thought she might not be available, and so we hadn't planned, and then I put her on the spot. So I appreciate you sharing your experiences and what you're seeing with caregivers. Yeah. Any questions for Amanda in her experience?
Can I ask a question about using T-Care with the grandparents? And I'm a little concerned about the appropriateness of the questions in T-Care when you're focusing it on children, especially maybe the questions about, do you feel like they're demanding more, things like that. I don't want to pathologize the children. So just wondered, how that's being handled.
I actually just had a grandparent that just kind of came up with her. She's raising her 17-year-old granddaughter, and she took the T-Care pre-assessment. And when she saw the results, she was very like, oh my gosh, she felt really kind of bad about it, because she thought they were red and it showed high levels of stress. And so she felt bad. That was kind of her initial reaction. But in talking to her, I mean, she is very stressed. These things are true. She's very stressed. Her children are not helping with raising these kids. They're teenage girls. And so, I just kind of talked her through that. Like, yeah, you are really stressed though. I mean, the key care assessment shows that, but that's not a surprise. And so plugging in some of those services and supports then to try to lower that stress. She's been very receptive to it. Yeah.
Thank you, Amanda. Yes. Jen Agnew, I think I saw you jump in. So I will. Hi, Jen. I will pass the mic. I don't have a baton or a podium today. I came. I will pass the open Zoom mic over to you. No worries, Carrie. We're always okay with technical glitches.
That's funny.
Yeah.
So I don't really have a planned per se, other than to share with you guys some of the programs that I've been able to take advantage of. And I think I'm very lucky and in a different situation, because I know a lot of you at AgeGuide, and you've all helped me so much as a caregiver, just to find these resources. And this is way back when Colette was a good friend of mine, is a good friend of mine, and she helped point some different things out. I should probably take the TCARE assessment, see where I'm at personally. But so let me share some of the things. So my mom has dementia, and we're kind of going through the different stages. Obviously, she's in a different place than when she was 3 years ago. Still, these programs are very relevant, and still she's benefiting. And actually, I can be on this because she's actually at Riverwalk today. So she goes to Riverwalk Adult Day Center once a week now. She used to go twice a week. And it's really just to kind of get her away from me. So she has some interaction with other people other than, our immediate family and wherever I might be going. So it just gives her an opportunity, as well as me, I think, probably to step away a little bit and just be exposed and do some other things other than kind of hanging out, like I said, with me or being at home. So I went through the Caregiver Stress Buster class, which was really super helpful, because I think caregivers, we're really kind of hard on ourselves and don't really realize exactly how hard our job is until we actually sit down and go, oh, I do a lot, or realize, because you're so busy moving, trying to juggle everything. I also have 4 kids, and my mom moved in with me 6 years ago. So all of my children were still high school teenagers. So it was a lot. And that class really did teach me a lot. And I was able to really take a lot away from that I still use, and that I still can pass on to other families that I talk to in my role at Lilac House when I talk with other families. So let's see, Riverwalk Adult Day Services. I have to read my list because I've got a lot. Music and Memory, she absolutely loved. And Jennifer was telling me that they actually have a little video of her. My mother is very charming and quite the character. So she has a little dog, Cody. So that's one of the sensory animals, and she absolutely loves it. And we actually did a little video with her and Cody for Colette a while back. Bingo Size we did, Good Memories Choir she's done. Colette had another program, and I'm sure I'm going to say this incorrectly, but it was the Tales and Travels, or Travels and Tales. Do I have that right, guys? So my mom's Irish.
Yeah.
We did the one from Ireland, and it's kind of funny. Like I said, my mom has dementia, so I had to go in search of all the pieces before I could return it, but she really enjoyed that a lot. And then, at the beginning, when I still had a caregiver as well, the DuPage Senior Services, the respite funds were really helpful. I've shared a lot of these programs with the families that I've met, the families that I've talked to, letting them know that these services are available, that they should look into the respite funds as well. It's a huge help, because even bringing in caregivers is so expensive. So those are some of the things that we've been able to do. And from a caregiver perspective, it's really nice to have these resources. I can't thank you guys enough for what you do, because it is very difficult and challenging to feel like you are entertaining them enough. You are challenging them enough. You are giving them the attention around having to get the groceries. Like my mom's with me all the time. But you know, if we're running around and getting groceries or cleaning the house, whatever that looks like, I still have this need to, oh, should I be doing something else? Should I be playing a game? Should I be taking time away? And it's very challenging when you are taking care of someone that lives with you, because you still have all those tasks, right? You still have to do all those things, but then you have somebody by your side that may not be able to engage or interact. So it's kind of like you need to find something for them to do in order to do what you need to do, but also then, you know, it's this push me, pull me. That's where I say, you know, maybe I should take that assessment as well. But I think that's one of the things that caregivers really struggle with is the guilt over, am I doing the right job? Am I doing it correctly? Am I neglecting the house? Am I neglecting these other things? So a lot of these services are things that you can bring to them, that they can engage with, that not all of them need your participation along with them. And so I think it gives them an outlet other than just shadowing you as well. So.
Thank you. Thank you, Jen.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much. Anybody have questions about Jen's experience? Okay, it sounds like it looks like we have a couple in the chat. So Brenda from Catholic Charities, wanted to know about the questions specifically in TCare. I don't know, Sherry, if you can speak to more specifically what the questions look like, maybe even in just the screening.
Yeah, sure. And actually,
One idea.
with the screener, I have a paper. So the actual full assessment is really can only be given by those that are trained to be specialists, but the actual screener tool, I can send out a link that's to the Sandbox site. So you could actually answer the questions and see
Okay,
how the flow
nice.
is.
Okay.
I'll see if I can find one while we're on the call. Otherwise, I can get it out to you, Lucinda, and
Yeah.
you can share it. It's just a Sandbox one, so it wouldn't affect anything, but you'd have a feel for what the questions are like.
Okay. I do have it from a previous email, I think,
Okay.
unless it's different, but yeah, we
Yeah,
can
yeah,
send it out to
yeah.
the network so they can see it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And then for those of you who would like to, so taking the screening for TCare is not limited to the TCare specialist. So a caregiver can complete that independently on their own time. You're certainly able to walk through that with a caregiver, and we encourage you to do that. If that's available to you. We all know that it's probably hard for many of us to go back to something when we get sent a resource. It takes time, and as caregivers are, you know, making their way through their day and getting their tasks checked off, maybe going back to a screening would be difficult. So anyone can do the screening with a caregiver. The caregiver can do it themselves. If you do the screening on our website, it triggers the referral in the system, and we would send that to the appropriate grantee. All of the caregiver resource centers do have the link to the screening on their own website. So if you're perhaps in Lake County, Family Service of Lake, it should be on their website. So you can go directly to the screener. They're all the same, but it goes directly to their agency. Again, it is on our site for the whole region, so we can then assign them out if that's easier for people. So there's a couple different ways you can access that screening for your clients. Any other questions? Let's see. Any other questions about TCare?
I am down for road trips if anyone,
Yes.
I'm in St. Louis, so it's not that far.
I see that Joy from our agency asked about the podcast to Lilac House. So Jen Agnew is also the owner of Lilac House. And so she was part of our podcast. So another reason to listen to our podcast that Jen is sharing her experiences. And we can send that link out as well after the fact.
So for those of you, I
Yeah.
don't know if you
ahead.
recall or mentioned it at the Funded Partners meeting, but we had a series on caregivers. And we were fortunate enough to have Jen come and speak, and her message on the podcast that she did was so powerful and really just amazing to listen to. So hopefully we'll get it on the chat here today for the link, and then you could check it out on your way home from work today or when you have time over the next week or so. It's really eye-opening, and it was really really wonderful to listen to it. So thanks, Joy, for mentioning that.
Any other questions? We're about a half an hour ahead of schedule, which is always good.
Okay. Well, thank you, Lucinda, and thank you, Jen and Sherry and Amanda, everyone for being here today and for helping support us in this effort to just again, provide education awareness about TCare and all the caregiver services that are available in our region. And we'll be sending follow-up information today. I'm hoping that this time we spent together, maybe it helped you think of a few people who might benefit from some caregiver support services that you can contact. Like I said at the beginning, sometimes they just ask once, if they ask at all. And we have to be sure to give them the resources and get them the help they need the first time they ask, because like Jen said, they're so busy that they may not have an opportunity to ask again. So thank you all for being on this call today. We really appreciate it, and we hope it helped.